This is the Outpost RBA podcast, where we lead security teams to higher ground and new perspectives needed to secure the frontiers of enterprise, with hosts Will Robus and Stuart McIntosh.
Welcome, everyone, to the Outpost RBA podcast. Thank you for joining us once again. My name is Will Robus, and with me, as always, is Stuart McIntosh. Stuart, what's it look like today?
It looks like we're going to be talking about a hot take in the industry. So you always know I love those.
So yeah, I guess this is our first kind of hot takes episode, right? If we've bounced around buzzwords, but we've kind of avoided unpacking them. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about a term that has become one of kind of the main cyber themes of the year. And that term is resilience. And like I said, we're going to unpack that a little bit from our point of view and what we see, not only working with customers, but kind of as the future of where security is going. So yeah, before we get into the meat of today, I just want to cover a couple of little introductory announcements. As always, we like to give a shout out to the RBA community. That is our offline, online meeting space for defensive security professionals, people interested in risk-based alerting, Splunk Enterprise Security. That's a big focus area for people that join. But yeah, it's really become a connecting point and a place that you can have a dialogue with other defensive security practitioners, security engineers, threat detection folks, as well as kind of SOC and incident response people. But we're excited that it's constantly growing. We're getting new people adding every week from all over the world, and it's the Slack is kind of the main, I would say, connecting point, because it's sort of a 24/7. But we also have kind of the landing page for everything is RBA.community. And there's a number of links and resources there from Splunk, from practitioners, from other partners as well. So that's definitely the RBA.community is the site to check out, and then join the Slack to kind of get introduced to the dialogues that we have going. And we like to highlight that pretty much all of the risk-based alerting early adopters are very, very active in that group. So Matt Snyder, who is highlighted at .conf, Haley Mills, who's a strategist at Splunk, we've had on the show before. So yeah, it's really a true meeting point for the cutting edge and the people with a lot of experience. So check that out. Second thing I want to mention is Outpost has really been promoting what we call an RBA readiness review. This is a 2-hour free over-the-shoulder walkthrough of your Splunk environment, enterprise security environment, and then your current kind of detections and alerts. With the, foundationally, ES needs to be in a good state of configuration in order for RBA to be successful. So we look at kind of those building blocks. But then we also kind of look at, all right, how well positioned are you to start to roll out RBA, kind of based on some of these best practices and things like that. So, Stuart, you want to kind of make a comment about how those usually go with customers and what kind of experiences?
Just sign up. No, it's one of those things where people, after we do the review and we send the report, everyone said, I don't know why we waited so long to do this. It's one of those where you learn a lot about your environment. You learn about, like, we bring anecdotes about, like, other things we've seen, whether it's a similar data feed or it's how other enterprises are operating. So it's just a really good 2-hour kind of, it's like a jam session on ES and Splunk. And then afterwards, it's like, oh, okay, now I know some things I can do to make it better. So It's just a really good use of time.
And I would say one of the reasons people tend to say, oh, I wish we would have done this sooner, is what we see more times than not is companies are way closer to leveraging and being successful with RBA than they think they are. So that's essentially one of our goals to highlight is, all right, here's the 3 to 5 things that you should focus on and kind of shape up, but it's none of them is a terribly heavy lift. So it's hopefully,
and it's not an audit, so you don't have to get everything put away before the guests come to see your house. Like, it is not like that. It's absolutely a come as you are situation, and let's just dig through things and set up a plan.
yes.
So there's no need to, well, if only I get these things done, then I'll ask. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Just come as you are. It's
Excellent.
all for your program.
Yeah. So reach out. We've got some information linked on the RBA community site, or just go to our website. We've got a quick sign up form to get that scheduled. So, all right. With that, let's dive into the topic. And we're titling this conversation "Resilience." Is it spin or substance? So we've heard of this word a lot. We've talked about it a little bit. I think I like it. I think it's a good word. It feels good. It's I think it's a little more strategic, and I don't want to say aspirational, but the feelings that I get evoked when I think of resilience, I think of withstanding whatever is thrown at you, and coming out in a position of at least like strength, or you're not significantly wounded, or you're not in a worse off place, or a much worse off place than you were when the barrage or the onslaught started. So I like what it's trying to communicate and trying to bring people to, or programs to, if you will.
Is it spin or is it substance? Before we dive into it, what's your take? Spin or substance? And where have you been hearing the term? Not vendor specific, just like, our customers saying it, our vendors saying it. Are you hearing it on webinars? Like, where are you getting exposed to it? And does it feel like spin or substance to you?
Well, it feels like a reach, because I feel like it's I mean, that's why I said it's aspirational. And I think we see it more from probably the vendor and provider side, trying to align value propositions that they're trying to bring to programs with what leadership is trying to accomplish. And we talked about that a lot in other episodes, like what are cyber leaders trying to accomplish, and what is their North Star? And it's difficult because there's a lot of competing priorities there. So I think it's and that's why I say it's a little more strategic, because I think it has an opportunity to align a lot of those things to a single kind of a single path and outcome. But like everything else, the devil's in the details.
And I think I tend to agree with you, which is, it feels good. I love that people are starting to use it in conversation, but it could quickly turn into spin if there's no oomph to it, if there's nothing backing it other than it's a discussion point. Like, how do we actually relate to it to make it something of substance, something actionable, something defendable, something demonstrable? Like, we can actually demonstrate resilience.
Yeah. And the part that I like about it in our conversations on it and trying to unpack it is, it's something that has an opportunity to build something durable from a systems perspective. And that seems, I mean, we've talked about it before, like it's a approach that seems to be lacking in a lot of ideas or solutions, or I mean, it's inside of customers, but it's in the vendor and provider network, right? And we've talked about this quote before from Palmer Luckey, but we just see and feel like there's too much of kind of what he said. And he said this: we're paid to do work, not to make things work. And that's a big part of what we see in the industry from a solutions perspective, again, inside and outside of customers. So resilience has the potential to change that, I think. What do you have any thoughts on that? Or
so I always love that quote because it's Palmer specifically talking about the defense industrial base and how defense contracts were traditionally done, as opposed to why were they disruptive at Anduril. And they were disruptive because they were pitching, you don't have to, like, we already de-risked everything. Here's a product, here's how it works, here's how it serves your greater mission. Already here. You can buy it right now and let's start integrating it. As opposed to the traditional approach of bring me a problem statement and I will design everything for your problem statement. And so what I like is he's trying to anchor into their mission vision. And I think that's what might be missing in security is what is the mission vision? Whenever we deal with work with leaders, very commonly it's always about a technology or a group. Like, how often have we heard, oh, well, we just stood up a threat intel group? Okay, how does that fit your mission vision? We felt like we needed a threat intel group. Okay, how does it serve your mission vision? And I think that's where resilience can come in. And what I love about it is not one single vendor can say we are the resilient vendor. Like this is what we say, other than IBM, because that's actually their product name. But other than that, what I love is that it's meant, what I'm hoping, and like I think through this conversation, I hope it's a trigger inward to talk about your program, to say what matters. How do we make it durable? How do we make it better? How do we move as a group, and then find partners who want to join us on our journey and support us on our journey. Right?
Yeah. Excellent. So I think we're gonna unpack this with kind of three different layers. And first, I think what I want to talk about, we'll talk about the definition of resilience and refine that a little more in the context of cybersecurity, which I think flows into breaking down, all right, what does this look like from an execution standpoint? And then the third thing we want to touch on is, all right, how do we measure this? Because it's a bit of an abstract concept, especially from a metric standpoint. So yeah, that's our plan to unpack this. So
let's see how far we go.
Yeah. So we kind of hit on the dictionary definition of resilience. It's not a survival, but a withstanding of forces, external, internal, whatever, under a barrage of stress or uncertainty or things like that. So,
which we have plenty of in today's climates, right? Like, budgets are constantly shifting. Like we hear every month budgets are either getting bigger or smaller. Like, we hear about tech transformation, we hear about acquisitions or spin-offs. Like, there's stressors to a security program coming from everywhere. That's part of what we started this to talk about.
Yeah, and all the way down to the, essentially event incident type of attack, right? So like, yeah, it goes to assume breach. Yes, we can't have a perfect perimeter, and we're gonna have some ingress. So how do we reduce the impact of that, and how do we make sure that it doesn't happen continuously and death by a thousand cuts kind of thing?
And even if it does happen, that we can absorb it, right? Instead of being so brittle that if it occurs, we're in trouble. How do we become more durable, less brittle, less fragile?
Yeah. And it's a there's a vision implied in applying the term resilience, I think. But the way it comes together is you really have to build and integrate all of these systems together from not only an IT perspective, but a security perspective, an alerting perspective, but also your fundamental sort of security practices, right? All the way, starting with kind of your vuln management, up to all these more advanced practices. So,
I mean, there's been a barrage of 0 days released in all different vendor stacks. Guess what that directly impacts? Your vulnerability management. So then it fires up that system. Hey, are we seeing this? Are we patching it? Do we have mitigating factors? Right? It's the stressor is that publicly, cat's out of the bag. You're on the clock. And then I think the systems approach to resilience is we know the external factor, that's the external force that's altering what we should be doing. How well do we absorb that and react to it? Or is it always a fire? Is it always, let's get 20 people in a room and spend tens of thousands of dollars an hour redirecting them to handle this,
Put you on the spot here, but can you think of any like examples of how we've seen that resilience play out in practice? And I mean, maybe that's a qualifier there, is it really is, it's not a state of being, it's resilience is a practice, and it is, the systems approach is how it all comes together, but executing these feedback loops that we've talked about earlier. But any examples off the top of your head that kind of demonstrate how we've seen resilience play out in the program?
Yeah. Here, and let me, I'll give an example, but what I want to hit on is resilience starts with a personal mindset. Are you looking at the work that you're doing in this idea of getting better and surviving contact with other forces? So when I approach work for a customer, when I write a detection, very specific scope, here's a detection, go write it. I approach it around what could go wrong. Well, there could be more events, there could be incorrect events, there could be, right? Like, so that's my personal mindset. But then what happens is when a team starts adopting it as a team mindset, then the tasks and systems that they interact with suddenly react. And then what happens is, as a program, are our leaders talking in this mindset? Is it what they're measuring as opposed to how many tickets did we get? Right. So that's where I'm excited about this conversation, is we have the ability to grow a mindset from an individual to an entire program so that we're all helping this mission vision. So in the example I'll give, when we like here, there's all kinds of them coming out of the SOC. The SOC is like ground zero of which camp are you in? Are you in this anti-fragile resilience mindset, or are you in this we just deal with whatever comes in and we just, it's just firefighting? And so the reason I say that is a very common thing that I'll just give one example. When we walk into companies, they tend to be buried in alerts. Fine. When we start analyzing what they're being affected by, a lot of it is internet noise that's just getting thrown at them. So like when we talked about these 0 days, crime groups, they absolutely start scanning the internet looking for this vulnerability so that they can get in. And so you have this, so everyone kind of will be like, well, that's just the internet, it's just not safe. Yeah, I get it, but you're letting it too far in your company. Like, you're letting it get too close to what matters to you. So that's why you're getting all these alerts. You're getting endpoint alerts because it got through your firewall or network defenses, or your IDS is lighting up with tens of thousands of alerts an hour because it got too far in. So all we do is we work with them to implement block lists of known threat intel feeds of bad stuff. And honestly, just blocking that SANS internet threat list, the D-Shield one, we have seen it cut 80 to 90% of alerts immediately out of a SOC. Why? You're not dealing with all of this garbage coming in that you have to sift through. So why? How does this relate to resilience? What we're doing is we're pushing back those concerns so that the inside stuff, we can react to it better. We're not chasing volumes of alerts. Also, we become more sensitive because we're blocking and filtering all that noise out. If something comes through, we're much more sensitive to that one event is weird because we don't have 100,000 next to it that are masking it. So it's this kind of idea of taking advantage of these layers, evict the noise as far out of your system as you can in a scalable way, and then start processing what is making it in. So I'm not sure if that totally covers it, but it's just, we've seen this in multiple places, this exact same cycle that all of a sudden makes the team think differently.
No, I think that's a great example. And it's, I mean, it kind of leads into the second layer that we want to unpack, and that's the execution of resilience inside of organizations. And that is a perfect example of a very accessible thing that teams or programs can execute. And we talk a lot about the people, process, technology piece, right? And we talk about how we see a lot of these initiatives, especially from leadership, focused around products or technical capabilities, which a lot of times to us feels almost backwards, right? And that block list is a perfect example. I mean, so what? I mean, the question is, why doesn't everybody do it right now? And but I can tell you from what I've witnessed in these transitions and these implementations is, well, they don't trust it, right? They don't trust that list that it's for them, right? And they're afraid it'll cause more problems, like they'll get more hate mail from users or whatever saying, hey, this is you guys are screwing this up. Like you blocked access to this business critical service, right? That's always the hesitation from security and network teams is we don't like enforcing, especially dynamic blocks, because what if we impact business? Yeah, totally fair. It's a justified concern, but that doesn't mean we stop. What that means is you're challenging our approach. So how do we test it? How do we help prove that is a founded or unfounded fear? Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, there's just not enough time in the day. They have an idea, they submit it. People don't like it for what could be very valid reasons, and then it stops. And then we move on to the next fire that took place while we were talking. And I think when those conversations die, that's where the innovation dies. And that's also where the maturity jumps die. It's not in the firefighting. The maturity and the resilience factors come out of we have an apprehension to putting this in. How do we deal with that apprehension? It takes effort. And I think sometimes that's why it falls off, because
yeah, it takes effort and it takes some confidence. And that's when we've seen this transition to go from, we don't block anything to, wow, we should really put these blocks in. And it's because of the visibility and data coming into, Splunk ES specifically, and correlating, hey, this stuff in this list is usually right, if not right, almost all the time.
And here, so I brought up before, it's a personal mindset that can be infectious, that can spread to a team, that can then spread to a program. And what we've seen is how does that happen? How do people adopt this mindset or begin starting to live in this mindset? And it's because we showed them a technology change with the evidence, with whatever, to help them upgrade their personal mindsets. They didn't know that they could search for this type of evidence. They didn't know where to start to diagnose what changes we could do. So all you do is we use the technology to help the people start changing the way they think and the way they approach their work, which then influences the processes. Because now when the detection engineers and the SOC analysts have personally said, hey, I want to make this better for all of us personally, then when they get together, all of a sudden the processes that they're talking about start reflecting that influence of the mindset. And so it's kind of weird. And here, this is awkward for us because we always say most problems come down to the people and the processes. There's plenty of capable technology, but here in this example, we're kind of reverting that, but we're flipping it a little bit to say this is how you spread the mindset. You start with a confidence in technology that spreads personally, that then moves into processes.
Well, the technology was always there, but it was all right, let's try out a new process, right? And that was the visibility and folding in some of those that threat intel from that list and showing the people, demonstrating to the people, hey, you're seeing a lot of alerts here because of this scanning and this traffic getting through. If you just, it was almost it's a one-to-one demonstration of like, this is pretty close. Like this will have way more benefit than it has negative effect. That's why you can have confidence in taking this course of action. But it's not in a silo.
So that's from security. You've done work around some resilience, around being anti-fragile, some of these in some of your prior roles.
Yeah. So
what's your experience from those?
So I've taken a similar approach when it comes to operations and execution. So I've done a couple of essentially like running small companies from a COO kind of CFO role. And one of those companies was essentially kind of a turnaround, right? It was a struggling company, from all aspects of business, and it needed an upgrade big time in order to compete, to be successful. And it was kind of like a hardware, software type of company. And we had very limited budget, right? Because that, all of this was the impetus of all this was kind of financial performance and profitability. But what I found to be very successful and repeatable was, all right, let's look at how our processes are operating now. And a lot of times, and I don't know if this is true in security, but a lot of times in business processes and execution, a process evolves to accommodate the small cases, right? So like 80-20, the 80-20 rule is something we use a lot. I use it a lot, right? So 80% of the volume comes from 20% of the transactions or something like that, right? But the molding of the process to manage those exceptions, which are rare, seems to drive a lot of these sort of inherent processes or things that evolve from just a pure operational perspective. So the first thing to do is that I've again found successful is you take a step back and look at, all right, what does this process look like when it's working well, right? What are the bottlenecks and where are the the issues and how often do they happen, or, you know, pulling out patterns of success and then looking at, okay, who do I have to execute this? You know, how much time and bandwidth do they have? Things like that. And if I needed to get more people on it, could I find them to do that? And things like that. So you kind of envision, design the next evolution of the process you try to have a small delta for what you're changing with the biggest amount of impact, trying to get the most coverage possible. So, and it was started with the process, which was closely related to who do I have to execute that, or who would I need? And then when you understand that and have a good feel for, all right, this is how this needs to go, then you go out and look at technology. And then you say, all right, this technology, I need it to do this, this, and this. And you spun up a lot of pilots, do a lot of like trials and things like that just to touch it, because, you know, the claims on any piece of technology don't always survive your expectations, right? Especially from a connectivity standpoint.
Or execution.
Yeah, connectivity for sure. It'd be like, oh yeah, we support integration with these datas. And then you pull in the data and it's like some CSV thing you have to download and upload. I'm like, that's not integration. Like, but yeah, so the process is where I like to start, and it's very tightly coupled with the people. So because if you introduce change, they're going to have to adopt that change, and if you can't make it harder, you have to make it easier and simpler.
And I think before you introduce change, I hope that whenever people hear us say process or system, that their mind immediately jumps to incentive. And the reason I say that is you need to understand in this process, what are the incentives for everyone interacting with it? So this work that this person's doing in accounting, yes, they're doing it. Yes, there's a process, and you want to make it better for them, but you also have to understand the incentives of their work. So their work is, hey, I use this to show that they need me here. Nothing wrong with that, but that's their incentive. They will be very hesitant to adopt the change where it may show anything other than that. Like so this is where you have to know these motivations or these incentives if you're ever trying to influence a process or a system.
Yeah. And simplification. And that's one of so again, like the 80-20 rule, right? Like looking at these patterns and these volumes of really anything. It gives you the ability to simplify things, and people appreciate that. It breeds consistency. It has natural alignment, and the things that people don't like to do or like even piss them off in their roles are always these outliers, and it sucks. And so through simplification, you can almost all but eliminate that. And then, I mean, that just makes them happier and makes their life easier. Again, if you can create that outcome as a kind of a core value, then distributing that change, having them adopt that change is way, way easier and way more successful.
And we see this all the time with detections. The complexity of a detection is directly aligned with how many edge cases they're trying to manage against. The more edge cases you have, the more complexity is added to everything. If you're adding it to the detection itself, that's being washed through everything, because now there's assumptions being made everywhere based on that complexity. And the other thing I've seen is, as a part of that process of streaming things or streamlining things or reducing complexity, shared vocabulary seems to make a big difference in this distillation approach. Because one of the things I've noticed is I'll see renames everywhere, and it's like, hey, what is all of this? And they're like, well, we call it this, but they call it that, and sometimes we mean the same thing and sometimes we don't. Whoa. if we're all participating in a process here, we need to be on the same page. Let's start with vocabulary. Let's start with a vision. And with those two, now we can all be honest about how can we make this better. But that vocabulary seems to be kind of an under discussed sticking point.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, yeah, and I like how you just kind of unpacked and layered that. And it starts with a vision. That's your vision and what you're trying to achieve. And resilience is a piece of that. But your vision really guides your design of the systems and how everything operates. But in order to get that alignment, to get people to work together, to be successful as a unit and a program, then you need to have clear incentives that are aligned across, and you have to be able to communicate those very clearly and consistently. So that's where that vocabulary piece comes in, because it's you got to have them all. It's a package deal. And you can start in different places, but in order to really roll that out, it has to all be there. And I also liked this introduction of the idea of complexity, and I think you could roll it up and just simply say complexity is the enemy of resilience.
It's for sure a force that acts on it.
Well, unnecessary complexity, or
well, is there any such thing? Because the no, like, it's kind of tongue in cheek, but like, it's there because someone felt it was necessary. The problem is it still necessary? And what's funny is there's like a tipping point where you almost have to declare bankruptcy on something, where the complexity is so you and I were talking to a readiness review. In case anyone has not signed up yet, please sign up for a readiness review, and you too can be a part of these conversations. But we found someone, and when they brought us in, their big concern, they want to go to RBA because they think it scales better. They love the approach and methodology. It's great. And so we're talking about their current detections. They had a detection that had over 600 lines of Splunk code. Massive. This thing was massive. 90% of it was business logic for maneuvering through what business unit is it? Is it a user or system? Is it something we've investigated and we know it's a flaw with the vendor? It is just this crazy bowl of spaghetti. And their fear that, so here's what happened. They hit a tipping point where they can no longer make it accurate. They can no longer change, right? So they analyzed it. They said, we need to change this. And everyone looked at it and said, I don't want to break it. It's way too big. And so they're essentially saying, listen, we need to then make a jump to a better way of approaching this, because we can't do it this way anymore. This approach will not scale. It is not stable, right? Like it's going to age out, and it becomes less useful the more time that passes. So there's like there's drivers to why do we need to adopt a resilient mindset? It's because the boat's moving. Whether you're on the dock or you're on the boat or you're in the water, boat's moving. It's not going to wait.
Yeah.
So
and I like that as a core tenet now of resilience, and that is you have to challenge and calibrate the complexity that you've introduced into your system. Because I mean, we talk about entropy a little bit too, but that's will absolutely become a problem if it's not addressed and kept calibrated.
So we have this idea. I think we work through what an idea of resilience is. We've talked about some of the ways you've executed on this idea, some of the ways that I have. But at the end of the day, what everyone wants to do is demonstrate outside of the bubble, maybe the people who don't understand this approach or haven't bought in, right? We talked about lack of confidence. How do we measure this mindset, the movement of evaluating our processes, our people, our tech? How do we measure those changes to show why this approach leadership should invest in?
Yeah,
that it's making a difference.
Yeah, and it starts with the mindset, but it quickly becomes a practice, something that's constantly being done and improved upon. And how do we measure that practice? And we've had discussions about this. I think we've posted a couple of articles about this in the past from a metric standpoint. But I always go back. I mean, in my work here with you, as well as the previous company I've been with, it's
hit me with it.
Yeah,
hit me with
so,
it, because I know you've got a quote on the top of your mind every time we talk metrics.
Right. And it's the John Wooden quote, right? It's the don't mistake activity for achievement. And I bring that out all the time. So in prepping for this discussion, I actually, I looked it up, and the don't mistake activity for achievement is really just the first part of it, right? So the rest of it, I think, is even more apropos to this discussion, as well as how we operate and organize and execute. So the full quote is, don't mistake activity for achievement. To produce results, tasks must be well organized and properly executed. Otherwise, it's no different from children running around the playground. Everyone is doing something, but nothing is being done. Lots of activity, no achievement. And not to be judgy, but we see this a lot.
Who in security programs can't chuckle at the comment, it's like children running around the playground? And here, that's not to say what you're doing is wrong. It's simply meant to kind of shake you a little bit and say, how do we get more? How do we get a greater impact and effect?
Yeah,
and I think you've got to look. You are the quality of the questions you ask, right? Like, we also hear that quote. And I think metrics are the questions being asked of these programs. And so very quickly, that's where we need to start looking at how to update these. Are they measuring movement, or are they measuring improvement? Right? Like, which one are they? It's okay to have both, but be realistic. Don't extrapolate movement for improvement.
Yeah. And that's of course easier said than done. I mean, we've traditionally measured work, right? Outputs, what you've quote unquote accomplished. And those measurements are pretty easy, right? Number of tickets, number of alerts, detections released, all that stuff.
Project hours spent.
Exactly. Yeah. Effort, so doing work is easy to measure. Measuring achievement and impact is a lot more difficult and a lot more nuanced. So in the discussion of resilience, let me back up and say, in cybersecurity, the only true metric that we really have is, did we get popped? Did we get breached? Right. And that is what we call trailing metric, right? So it's only evident after the fact. So it's a measurement that's too late. And if you're doing a good job, if you're being successful, that metric should be 0, right? So, or
I was a part of a security. I was working in a security program. They didn't get popped. They got popped 2 times in 3 years. So if that's your measure, once it hits 0, how do we just stop investing? Do we just stop doing? Right? Because it's already 0. Why would we put more money in this? It's already at 0. And then the other thing that happens, when the 1 occurs, people lose their minds. They're like, the sky is falling, because it's so rare that they think it's significant. And it really wasn't. It was restricted to a single machine. It was not a big deal. So it's almost like that you also need to look at how quickly did we cap it and fix it. But that only gets tested when that other trailing factor also fires. So it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, and like I said, we've explored this before, but really I think the true measure of achievement is to be resilient. You need to have a certain amount of strength and the ability to react and recover, right? And that is really all about, again, strength and capability. So can we measure what we do in cybersecurity in terms of, are we getting stronger and are we increasing our capabilities? So I think that's the holy grail from a metric standpoint. And it's a positive analysis, right? If it's going in the right way, right? And it's a leading.
Trending matters with metrics like that. It's not what the number is, it's the direction of the number.
Yeah.
And also for leadership that's looking at this kind of different approach to measurement, don't react that in 1 hour or 1 day or 1 week that trend went down. Don't get angry, don't get upset, don't feel like, man, we're getting caught with the door wide open. It's not like that. Sometimes there's just a healthy churn where, hey, we were suddenly retasked to go work on an acquisition. So that's why it trended down, because the work that we're used to doing is not what we were doing. Like, it's okay.
Yeah. This isn't
pay attention to directionality.
Yeah, this isn't a 60-minute football game. This is a lifelong marathon. So
it's a long game here.
So yeah, I don't think we have time to dig. We'll dig into like specific metrics and things that we've talked about and kind of proposed before, but to just kind of set the layer of resilience around how do we measure this. I think that idea of, are we getting stronger, more capable? And again, that's a leading indicator, right? I mean, it doesn't mean you're perfect or you're not going to get in some trouble or whatever, but it does give you some indication that, hey, we're reducing the probability of that impact.
The idea of adding a threat intel team, headcount or technology does not influence what you just said. Did we add capability or did we add strength? But what really does, how are those people using these systems, influencing other processes? Once you integrate the people, the processes, and the tech, then all of a sudden you'll watch your strength and your capability numbers go up. And the other thing I want to say on this, get creative with some of the metrics. So the thing that we've tossed around before is anti-fragile. Well, okay, what's the difference between something recovers or something's anti-fragile? Anti-fragile gets better in contact with other forces. It gets stronger. It gets more capable. It needs stressors to get better. And I think that is really close to what we do in security. Your detection quality becomes better the more contact they come into. And that's why we're big fans of adversary simulation and red teams and pen tests, because what that is it's contact. Your detections, your alerting, your response, they're now feeling stressors. And it's a way of testing those strength and capability metrics that you're looking at. So don't just look at how to measure those. See how we can measure, are we introducing the right amount of stress into the system as well?
Yeah. No, it's a great analog. It's kind of this strength and conditioning as a team and a program. And that concept applies for your essentially external threats and what you're seeing in your alert outputs, and looking at some of these whether it be scans or ingresses, and say, hey, that shouldn't have happened. What why is it happening, and how do we make sure it doesn't happen again? So like that, that little cut here and there, if you can take it and say, all right, we're going to take this back and we're going to harden our systems so that this doesn't even, it bounces off. And that's when we talk about the feedback loops and the power of that. And that happens as business as usual, right? That is under the normal course of alerts in the SOX review of it, and to give them the ability to say, hey, this is dumb. This should never happen again. Let's fix it, as permanently as we can make it, right? And that's that idea of the strength and conditioning piece from a day-to-day basis.
And what we're saying is, instead of it being, I'm going to work out today, I don't know about the next month, I'm just going to work out today. That's this idea of, well, we did a project so that this doesn't happen again. We set up a project so that we never get ransomware to come in the front door again. What you and I are talking about is essentially lifestyle. We have a capability that whenever there's an external force that we no longer want, here's the process. Here's the capability to just do it. So it becomes less about special projects or special activities and more about, this is a healthy security lifestyle. And when everyone wakes up and comes to work, everyone knows how they're helping. They're plugged into this thing that becomes resilient because of how they approach their work.
Yeah, excellent. No, I think that's a perfect summary. So yeah, let's just as a little recap. I mean, this conversation definitely makes me more excited about the term resilience, because I think it, like I said earlier, like makes me feel good, but also I think it has an opportunity to become very, very durable. But like anything else, it's a process and a journey. And I mean, I liked how you started and said it starts with a mindset, and that's absolutely, and it's a personal mindset. And that is, it's a duty, which is it's a noble and positive duty, right? Instead of firefighting, or like we're on the front lines of resilience here. So if you can start shaping your mind to that end, I think that's a huge first step in success. And then, the second part is you have to distribute that to the rest of your team in your organization. So through alignment, again, we talked about the people and process piece being first and foremost, and then the technology piece kind of complementing that, or essentially distributing or scaling that. And then the last thing was, how do we measure this? And it's a little harder, it's a little more nuanced, but if you have that mindset, can create some metrics that really underscore the strength and capability piece, and then you can get everyone believing in it, right? We've seen a lot of programs struggle because different groups have different sort of belief or confidence in the different metrics. So, and
I just want to say, like, maybe keeping a parking lot of these measurement ideas could be really fun. And what I say by that is, know if it's a stress or a response. So is this measuring stressors or the response to stress? Like that right there, super valuable. Is this a measurement of strength or capability? And then for all of those, is this a leading or trailing metric? And I think just asking those questions, take your current metrics. Literally, if you're tracking right now how many alerts are coming into our SOC, great, there's a number. What is that number? Where does it fit in these kind of bins that we said? Well, it's a capability because we know that something's happening. Great. It's in the capability. Is it a leading indicator? Well, I would think yes. But the more I look at it, no, it's not. It's trailing based on the detection and prevention controls put in. If we make prevention better, number of alerts goes down. So that right there inherently says this is a trailing indicator. But when you meet leadership, they almost treat it as if it is the number one leading indicator of security. It's not.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a byproduct.
We've definitely seen that. So yeah, I
this is awesome. I appreciate the discussion.
No, this was good. And I guess to answer the original question, is it spin or substance? And it depends. It's up to you, really, because
Schrodinger's resilience.
Yeah, right. You're not going to buy it. You're not going to buy resilience. You can't just sign up for it. You can't turn it on. It doesn't work like that. So you really have to make it a practice. And if you're able to do that, I think, there's a lot of success to be had in a very durable and empowering way.
And try it out in your own role. So if you are a security engineer, a SOC analyst, a security leader, maybe a sales engineer even, doesn't matter. Try on reorienting your mindset to this idea of resilience and just look at what you're interacting with. Look at the conversations you're having, the meetings you're having, the work you do, and just see if it shifts anything. Like, okay, well, would I approach this differently if I'm in this idea of resilience?
Yeah, that's a great call to action. Because I mean, back to when we were kind of talking about the readiness review earlier, like we don't see a lot of teams and companies missing big pieces of anything, right? Especially from a technology and data standpoint. So it's really the delta is process and people, and we've seen it be very, very successful when you kind of approach it the right way. So with that, we'll wrap for this episode. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you gave it some insight. Outpost is here as a practice to help you with all of these different aspects and be essentially your guide through where you're at today to kind of where you want to be. And we've got a lot of different tools and tricks in our bag of experience.
And let us know on LinkedIn or in the Slack channel or something, like if you have questions about this or experience examples or just want to talk about this, absolutely hit us up, because a lot of these discussions get shaped with what are people in these programs dealing with? What are they encountering? What are they struggling with? And what are they killing it at? Like, what have they absolutely mastered? And we like hearing about all of those, because it really helps share that knowledge. Like, because I think to what you were saying, people own EDRs. So that's not the secret sauce. What's the secret sauce? I think it's these unlock keys that people have around how they use it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what we're trying to share.
Absolutely. So once again, thanks for listening. We appreciate it. Reach out on LinkedIn or reach out on our website. As Stuart said, we'd love to have any discussions or attack any questions or anything like that. So until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Outpost RBA podcast. Stuart McIntosh has over 20 years of experience building and maturing security programs inside Fortune 500 companies. In 2018, he gave a talk at Splunks.conf titled "Say Goodbye to Your Big Alert Pipeline and Say Hello to Your New Risk-Based Approach," which started the rise of RBA. As the creator and architect of risk-based alerting, he pioneers security methodologies at Outpost Security, which he co-founded with Will. Will Robus has spent the last 20 years in the operations or financial C-suites at technology and security companies, focused on what drives results and successful scaling. At Outpost Security, he works with CISOs to imagine a more expansive future for their SOC, once it has a solid RBA foundation. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Share it with your security team and CISO. Connect with us on LinkedIn and contact us at outpost-security.com to lift your team out of the fog of alert confusion with RBA 0 to 1.